Hello, and thank you for joining us for our tandem interview series. My name is Dwin, and I'm really excited today to be sitting down with local illustrator Simone Shin. She was a guest at our recent gala, so some of you were really lucky and got to meet her there. And she's also an illustrator for some really truly beautiful books. I have right in front of me one of my favorites, Nico Draws a Feeling. It's really beautiful. So yeah, we're so lucky to have you with us today.
Hello. Yes.
So yeah, so my first question is going back to the beginning when you were still a child, before you were an illustrator.
Yes.
When did you begin to start expressing yourself creatively?
Like a lot of artists when I was a child, elementary school
Right.
or kindergarten, I just drew a lot, and I also just whatever people had, pieces
Right.
of cardboard or wood or whatever they were, I would build stuff out of tape. I think I built like a telephone, it was like a specific type of telephone that out of cardboard and construction paper, and it had like an answering machine attached to it,
cool.
and all sorts of like a receptionist telephone.
Right.
And it was a very specific stuff. Like I wanted a Sanrio clock.
Right.
Once, and I could never get it, so I made it out of cardboard. And I would actually build my own books too. I would tape together pieces of paper in cardboard, and then write the story inside. But it was more about just the tangible book, so the story was not as important.
Right.
So half of the stories are like only halfway in there, but
Right.
I would create my own children's books.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a cool way for like a kid to like really start exploring art in that way.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you remember if there was like an exact moment that inspired you to become an illustrator, or just like a series of things, or?
It was just almost not by chance, but I went to art school in illustration, not knowing what that would amount to.
Right.
But then all of my teachers at Art Center were so inspirational. Like I want to say almost every single one I had, their illustration and fine art career was just so amazing that I was always like emulated them. I'm going to do what that teacher did. I'm going to do what this, and it's just sort of began that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it was really helpful to have lots of like classes to help you kind of figure out illustration that seems so different than just like, I'm going to draw a picture without having a story that goes with it necessarily. Yeah. That's so cool. How did you get your start illustrating books?
I was first illustrating a little bit like for magazines and other publications. And then I remember I wanted to at least illustrate one children's book.
Right.
It wasn't like I wanted to have a career in children's books.
Right.
And I sent out mailers and, for a couple of years just trying to get publishers to notice me. I hadn't joined the Children's Book Society's SCBWI yet, but I got my first two books that I did, which was Papa Gave Me a Stick and The Red Bicycle. They came to me and as my first books, kind of both around the same time. And then from there, I joined SCBWI and then met my agent at one of those.
Right.
And then, I think she saw I had already gotten some books in line, and just from getting an agent and then the conferences, just getting inspired to make a career out of it, because I had never, it had never dawned on me that somebody could do that, for a living.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely like when I was a kid, I remember having a dream of like, oh, I could just draw some pictures.
Yeah.
And that would be a job.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem real sometimes. That's really cool. So what's the process like? How do you find the authors that you illustrate for? Do they approach you? Like, how does that whole process work?
I have an agent. So the first couple I had were just, they found me after I reached out to a bunch of people. And then my agent finds the other ones, and also just meeting people through a lot of the conferences and events. What was that?
Yeah. So just how does it work? So after they found you, then how does it work? Do they send you just like a manuscript and then you draw pictures? They tell you like how many?
Oh yeah. So everything is like through email, and you get like the manuscript, and they ask if you want to do it, and you read it, and say yes or no. And then from there, depending on the publisher, they may give you a lot of directions on to how to illustrate it. They may give you none, and just be actually really secretive and say, we really don't want you to know what the author had in mind. We want your imagination do everything, and then I just send out like thumbnails at first.
Right. And then do you go back and do you ever communicate with like the author directly, or is it all with a publisher, or does it change based on each book?
I don't think I've ever met an author that I work for. So yeah, usually you do not talk to the author at all. It's all through editor and then my agent and all that. But yeah, the process is really slow. It's like small little thumbnail sketches with like stick figures type thing. At least for me, that's how it starts. And then loose sketches, and then kind of tight sketches where half the time I'm trying to figure out what the characters look like or who the characters even will be.
Awesome.
And then, keeps going from there.
Right. That's so cool. What do you think the hardest part of it is, the illustration process?
For children's books, it's definitely a lot of I feel like all of it is hard.
Right.
I feel like the initial concept, just what you're going to illustrate. Is it going to be people? Is it going to be animals that look like people? Is it going to be a family? Is it going to be different families? All of that. I usually, right when I'm reading it, have this gut instinct of like what I think it's going to go towards, and it ends up going towards that anyway.
Right.
And then it's also difficult when I get to the actual final art part, and I have to decide the color palette and the structure of what these people look like, all that technical stuff. It takes a really long time for me to do the very first image because I'm figuring all of that, and then maybe the second image will also take a while, and then after that you get into a groove. But the very initial figuring everything out to me is...
Right. So the beginning is like real slow, and then by the end you've kind of got all the pieces there.
Yeah, and then it's just sort of like as the pages go through, just putting in the information. Yeah.
Cool.
Which I like putting in the information more because it's more relaxing.
Yeah, well, I imagine.
Yeah, you can listen to music while you're doing it.
But
actually before that, I can't even listen to music because it's like information being told. It's like reading a book. I feel like I was telling my friend, because a lot of people think that artists, if they're not artists at all, they assume like artists are very like free to be me. You don't have to know numbers. You don't have to really use any other side of your brain except for like the emotional side that gets you wherever. And it always surprises people that I feel like it's both sides. You definitely have to sit there and, the conceptual part takes so much of, I don't know, the part of your brain that's logical that I cannot read anything else. I can't really listen to anybody talking to me. I can't listen to music. And then there's another side where it's more like your instinct on how colors work and everything when you're finally filling in colors and all, and you've gotten in the groove, and I can listen to music and I can actually listen to a TV show at the same time. But I feel like that's using two different parts of your brains at two different times.
I went to art school, and I totally agree. There's times when you like can't hear anything else. It must be silence and working. Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So then, what is the best part? Even if it's not the easiest part, that's okay. But what is like the most fun part
of the process?
Yeah.
Like I like it when like I said, when I get into the groove of what I'm doing already, and I can sort of, you sit there for hours. I guess that's not my favorite part, having to sit there for hours, but like I can actually listen to a whole television series while I'm just continuing to make the images. But the best part is getting the book in the mail.
Oh yeah, I bet it's so satisfying.
That is like, the best part of the whole process is the smell of the new books and you open it up and all that.
Well, I'm sure like seeing it in the store or like seeing people reading it, that's got to be really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about my favorite of your books, just because I think it's really beautiful. Again, this is Nico. Nico Draws a Feeling, and we actually just added this to our collection. This is from our Story Cycles collection that I took from our library for today. And it's a really beautiful book. I think, for me as an artist, I think it's just really beautiful to see people making art about kids making art and about how it feels to draw things that you feel. And I want to point out my favorite illustration in here because I think it's really beautiful. And I hope people at home can see this. Yeah, this is one of my favorite pages. If you are watching this at home, I highly recommend going out to your local bookstore and getting yourself a copy, or just going to the library and finding it. But it's a really beautiful book and it's worth a look. So So I wanted to ask you, so this book is all about a young boy who is making art about how he feels, and it's often abstract. It's not like he drew a car and that's it.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. How do you think art helps children express their feelings?
I mean, in general, if you ask a kid to draw whatever they want, like that makes them happy, it's just going to be whatever is in their brain at the time.
Right.
So some kids are, at the time, just so obsessed with dragons, and then
Right.
that's all they want to do. Other kids are just out to make a big mess. So it's,
Right.
It's just a way for whatever emotion they have at the time to come out, in a creative way.
Yeah.
And it shows what their obsessions are, just like with the adults. Like when I was little, I made so many things out of cardboard. I liked dimensional art. I actually made some, I just got really obsessed with dimensional art also in art school. And I remember just making tons of doll houses
Right.
and all the specific furniture and everything all out of cardboard. Because, I just have an ongoing obsession with houses,
Right.
So with children, it's just like adults. It's
Right.
the same process of getting whatever obsession is out, into the world.
Right. And so then art really has been a way for you to, like an outlet for your emotions as a child. But do you think the same is true as an adult?
Yeah. I mean, it's different. When I went to art school, I learned, that it isn't just about like turning on music and splattering
Right.
paint on there,
Right.
and there's just so much you have to conceptualize before.
Right.
It's a more tedious process, and there was a while where I was like, gosh, this is not as fun because you have to be putting in a lot of work, but it's just so much more satisfying at the end, I guess.
Right.
So it is, it's a long process, but yeah.
Awesome. So I always ask authors about what the value of storytelling is with kids, and I know that you're not a writer, but you are an illustrator. So what do you think the value of storytelling with children is when you're using art as the storytelling medium? So what is the value of storytelling with art with kids?
Well, I do write as well, so hopefully that'll be
cool.
out in the world in a couple of years. But the value is just, I became a children's book illustrator because they constantly remind you at the conferences, like, remember what it was like when you looked at picture books. And I never forget any of I vividly remember certain pages in books, either because they haunted me or
Right.
were creepy, or they had certain details in there that I was just obsessed with. It was so cute, or whatever,
Right.
small details. So I definitely, my son, who is 8 years old now, when he, reads picture books, even when he was like 4, it was the same thing. Well, he'll always notice that little thing in the corner,
Right.
So you shouldn't make a mistake when
Right.
you're illustrating, because your child will look at the pages over and over again and notice all those little details,
Yeah.
And, it helps them be observant and really get sucked into a world, and strengthens their imagination.
Yeah.
I remember when I was little, I wish I remembered the name of the book, but I went to the library and I got this book, and it was, I want to say they were monsters. Maybe they were like green blobby people, and I don't know who the artist was, but it was a story about like a monster boy or something who ate a watermelon and then fell asleep and dreamed he was a watermelon that rolled down the stairs. I wish I knew the name of this book. And everywhere he went, everyone wanted to eat him. And the pictures that they had were these very simple pictures, but they were really creepy and very haunting to me, even though it was supposed to be playful.
Right.
And I won't, to this day, I don't know the name of the book or anything, but I obsessively think about the book.
Right. Well, if anyone watching at home can think of what that book is, please do comment and let us know.
A green monster boy who drinks watermelon.
And it's must be really cool then if your son is kind of doing the same, or was doing the same thing when he was 4, and now like seeing all the little things.
Yeah.
Must be really cool to see as a parent.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. So what do you think makes an illustration in a book engaging and powerful? Like, is there a thing that you could pinpoint?
I like to do, I admire artists that can do amazing landscapes, because that's something that's very hard for me. But whether it's like a landscape or people, just like with like a painting that's amazing to you, if it causes some sort of emotion in you.
Right.
Just like the landscape is just so like, just like you're in awe of it, or the look of the people and their body language or whatever it is causes some sort of emotion. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Also, I was just asking what makes an illustration powerful, and if there's a particular factor.
That would be it. Just if you think about the picture in the same way that you think about a painting that you would make, that you really want to evoke emotion. You know.
Awesome. So, what advice would you give to a young child who is saying they want to grow up and become an illustrator? Or if you don't necessarily have advice for that, what advice were you given while illustrating that you found really helpful or useful? Or you could have advice for both.
I would say, you know, for little kids, I always tell them, you know, just keep drawing. Even if you think it's bad, it'll eventually get better. It just, you know, like instruments, you just have to keep practicing. But I always tell adults, so many people are like, oh, I always had a picture book idea. Almost everyone will, when they find out you're an illustrator for books, they'll say that. And I always say, you can do it. Like some people, they just kind of push off the side, like, like me before, like who does that? You know, you don't know who the people are who actually make the books. And I always tell them, like, if you do your research and if you really, really, really wanted to, you could. I mean, you just have to not give up on the process and be serious about it. But really, I feel like anyone could do it. You just have to believe that it's a viable thing. It's something possible.
Right.
You know. And then the people who are trying to do it, I always let them know, like, it's, you know, people don't understand. It's like any other industry. You just have to keep. It is an industry. Some people don't realize it is. They just think somehow it magically gets on the shelves, but it's the same process where you're going to get rejected so many times, and you know you have to revise it a billion times, and you know, and just to keep, and everybody goes through it. It's just very hard.
So something that I think is interesting. So you're a parent, and you were also once a young artist. I don't know if your child is a young artist himself, but regardless, what advice would you have for parents or other adults who want to encourage the young artists in their lives? Like, how can adults encourage kids to be creative, and what would be helpful, you think?
Like, I never intentionally told my son to be creative in any way, but since I worked in picture books, I always tell people it's funny that if you look at, other than The Red Bicycle, almost all the other books are little boys. And they, like I said, I think a lot of illustrators are told to not make say if you're beginning, not make a portfolio of things that you think people want to see, but just whatever you're obsessed with, whatever is just easily coming out of you. And at the time, I had a son. So I think I didn't even realize a lot of my portfolio must have had that because I was asked to do a lot of little boys. And I was just like, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that's just what my art was looking like at the time because I had a baby, you know, a toddler. And it was just coincidental that when I was doing If I Could Drive Mama about like a toddler, preschool age boy, my son was around that age. And he would look at the screen and be like, is that me? You know, because it was like a mom and a boy that age. And then the next book I was doing happened to be someone a couple years older. And he was just like, is that supposed to be me? Because all of them sort of had his hair. Because I'm looking at him every day. So these kids are looking like him, you know. And I just thought, he's just surrounded by it. Like he would look at it on the screen, and a couple years later, he would somehow recognize the book in his hand. And I collect books because of just my job. And they've all become his books. So anything that anyone signed, unfortunately, is like ruined because he's already gone through all the pages. And, he would see me draw all the time. So he just thought that's what work was. When he was very little, he would go to the computer and be like, I'm working, and draw pictures because he thought that's what people did for their job. So I think just being around me, I never pushed books on him, but I read them to him all the time. That he's just, unlike me as a kid, I really liked books a lot, but no one really read to me, so I rarely read. It was hard for me to read, but he's obsessed with books. So a very good reader, you know. All of his artwork is like characters from books. You you know, and a lot of people think that I did that on purpose, but I really didn't.
Yeah, he's just thinking it out.
Yeah, it's just what happened, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I have one last question for you. So at Tandem, we're obviously big fans of books, and children's books in particular. So I'd love to know, what is your favorite children's book? And if you don't have just one, because I know it can be hard to think of just one, you know, a couple of ones that you go back to or that you enjoy, or even that you enjoy reading with your son.
Yeah, that is a really hard one. And I want to say one of the most influential books that when I was really little and then even later on in life is Ezra Jack Keats' The Snowy Day. And I remember that my library was sort of outdated when I was in elementary school, and they put up old Caldecott Whitting books, because I remember the little seal on them.
Right.
And I remember the one where the mosquito talks in the guy's ear, because I remember the illustration was so engaging. I thought it was almost like he looked like a statue or something. And I remember The Snowy Day was always on that shelf.
Right.
So it's just like ingrained in my memory as part of the library in elementary school. And they also would show it on PBS, like a little cartoon of it.
Yeah.
And I remember just like, oddly, because I went to SCBWI and somebody was speaking about that book, and I had the same connection to it, even though I am not African American. When I was in elementary school, I was probably one of the only minorities in the entire school. So to see that book on the shelf and then open it up and see sort of like somebody who has their own cultural identity within their own ethnicity, it was just like I was very, I felt a connection with the character. And also, you know, it just reminded me of visiting my grandmother, who, you know, she lived in Oakland the whole time, and I remember the city streets and everything just was all reminiscent of my own childhood. So I was very attached to that book because it was a person who didn't look like the people around me. And it's just so fun. And then I think his mother is in there, but his mother looked like my grandmother at the time. And there's just a lot of connections I had with that book. So later on, when it sort of became, I feel like all these books are coming re-popular again. You know? I was genuinely like, oh, I remember that one. I remember specifically visually seeing it on the shelf every day. And, you know, I have a sentimental attachment to that one.
And the illustrations of that book are so beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. And also they just made stamps of it. I guess last year they made stamps of it, and I had the stamps and everything.
Oh,
so cute. Yeah, they're very cute.
Later on in life, I did research on the illustrator, of course. And, I had no idea. He was like a true artist, you know, studied in Paris and was living there. And, he never had children or got married. It was just all about like the artwork was just like his fine art. You know, I was surprised. You know, it's not what you think of when you think of like children's book art. You know, but it was like his true calling. You know.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's about all we have for today. But before we go, I'd love to know: is there any way that people can find you online? Keep up with what's going on, see when you have new things coming out.
My blog is really outdated. I update a lot on Instagram, which is Simone Shin Mathet. Should I spell it out?
You can.
It's my name, Simone Shin, and then Mathet. That's on Instagram, and then my website, simonshin.com.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm trying to go more on Twitter and everything, but that's
Twitter's hard.
Yeah, Twitter's hard. I'm trying.
Awesome. Well, anyone who's watching should definitely go and buy copies of her book. This is my favorite, but there are other ones too. There's The Red Bicycle and Rumble, Grumble, Hush, which is also beautiful. I mean, there are a bunch. They're all really great. I highly recommend everyone go and check them out as soon as you can, because they're great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and I'm going to go turn off the camera.